There are times when you no longer need anyone to understand you. No need to win, no need to be right, no need for applause. You just want peace. Peace in how you live, how you think, how you stay silent in a noisy world. And that is when you begin the deepest journey, the journey back to your own center. In this video, I'm not here to teach you how to live. I'm simply sharing the things I've been through with Stoic philosophy, a philosophy that is neither ancient nor dogmatic, yet quietly rescues us whenever our minds falter. If you're looking to find stillness again, stay. 1. The quiet strength, when you no longer need to prove anything. Have you ever felt like you're always one step behind? Not slower in pace, but in presence, in the ability to hold the room. Sometimes you walk into a space and there's someone who says little, yet the entire atmosphere seems to orbit them. Not because they're more beautiful, smarter, or louder, but because they carry something hard to name. A steady calm, a quiet gravity. Have you ever sat in a conversation where someone twisted your words with a soft smile, or made you question yourself, not through criticism, but through a kind of composed silence? That's not luck, and it's not innate. It's strategy, an inner strategy. Most people react fast. They rush to speak, to explain, to defend themselves in every word, every tone. And that's exactly why they're easily steered before realizing they're playing a game with someone else's rules. But you don't have to be that person. There is a quieter kind of power, one that doesn't need to win, doesn't need applause, yet makes others cautious. That kind of power is forged in discipline, clarity, and most importantly, self-mastery. Imagine this. You're in the middle of an argument. Someone's voice is rising, their words are sharp, their emotions crashing like waves. And you stay still, your breath steady, you don't react, you don't explain, you don't lash out, you simply observe. You don't do this to win, but because you know, the one who loses emotional control has already lost their position. I remember once during a therapy session, a man in his 40s said to me, "I'm not afraid of yelling or betrayal. I'm afraid of losing control in front of others." He wasn't talking about pride. He was talking about feeling disconnected from himself. We often confuse expressing emotion with strength. But as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In every room, every conversation, every relationship, the one who stays calm holds the upper hand. Not because they manipulate, but because they don't let anyone else control their internal state. A person who's quick to anger, quick to hurt, quick to react, is someone easy to manipulate. They let the world decide when they hurt, when they rage, when they panic. They're like a puppet with too many strings that others pull. Think back. When was the last time you got pulled into an argument? Someone insulted you, made you feel small, and you responded right away, maybe with a sharp comeback, maybe with cold silence. But did it bring peace, or was it just a sense of being dragged, like someone pulled you from your own center? The Stoic doesn't chase validation. They don't answer every criticism. They don't need arguments to prove they're right. They hold silence, not out of weakness, but because they know well-timed silence is the strongest reply. You'll often see this in people who've lived through storms. They don't rush to speak. They listen more than they talk. They ask more than they conclude. And when they do answer, their words cut through the fog, simple, steady, needing no emphasis. Your calm isn't avoidance. It's a statement. It says, I don't let anyone else determine my emotional state. I remember an old friend, a retired military officer, once said, if I let emotion make the decision instead of my reason, I couldn't protect anyone, not even myself. That's not theory. That's experience from someone who stood in life or death and chose to stay centered. You can begin with something small. Next time someone tries to provoke you, pause for 3 seconds. When emotion rises, inhale and ask, is this reaction worth it? And if it's not, don't react. Not because you lost, but because you're no longer playing that game. In the end, I want you to carry this with you. Real power doesn't come from making others fear you. It comes from no longer fearing the loss of yourself. If this resonates with you, if it touches something in you, write in the comments. I choose to stay centered, so that each time you return, you'll remember you no longer need to prove anything. 2. When silence becomes the strongest weapon. Imagine a morning like this. You're sitting in your usual cafe, soft golden light filtering through the fogged glass. Across the table is a colleague or a friend, someone who just said something that rubbed you the wrong way. But instead of replying, you stay silent. You just look at them, steady, without nodding or shaking your head. No defensiveness, no retreat. And in that silence, something happens. The other person starts speaking again, faster, explaining, flustered, or sometimes they fall silent with you. And in that moment, you realize you don't need to speak to be heard. Sometimes silence itself compels others to listen more deeply, not just to your words, but to the presence you carry. I once worked with a client, a man in his 50s, CEO of a tech company. He told me, "I used to think I had to talk a lot to show my intelligence. Now I just ask one question and stay quiet. And in that silence, I see people reveal the most." Have you ever witnessed this? In a meeting, the quietest person is often the one people listen to most. When they speak, the room pauses. Not because they hold power, but because they don't speak just to be heard. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your actions speak, and let silence speak for you when action is not yet due." Most people are afraid of silence. They rush to fill it with words, awkward smiles, trivial stories, because they think that if they don't talk, they'll be left behind, misunderstood, or judged. But Stoics do not run from silence. They stay in it, like a warrior in a foggy field, not rushing forward, not dodging sideways. They wait, and as they wait, others begin to reveal themselves. Do you know what happens in a negotiation when you remain silent? The other party often feels so uncomfortable, they break the silence themselves by offering more, revealing more, even lowering their own value, just to escape the stillness. That's not manipulation, it's the posture of mastery, when you know your silence has worth and you don't rush to squander it. Epictetus said something I deeply resonate with. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, for a reason. We were born to listen more than speak, to observe more than judge. In therapy, I've met people who had to relearn how to simply sit in silence. They couldn't stand even 5 seconds without sound, because to them, silence meant abandonment, loss of control, disorder. But then when they learned to stay still, to let emotions pass, to let thoughts be without needing to explain, that's when they began to heal. The mind stopped struggling, the heart grew steadier. Silence doesn't make you weak. On the contrary, it's a sign of inner strength. It says, I don't need to explain everything. I am at peace enough to listen. And in an age where everyone is scrambling to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, the one who doesn't need that is often the one most respected. Try this next time at a family dinner or a meeting. When someone asks, "What do you mean?" Instead of replying immediately, pause for a few seconds. Look them in the eyes. Let that silence become the stage. You'll find some messages don't need to be said. Just your presence, your true presence is enough. If you've ever experienced a silence so profound it changed your perspective, leave a comment. I choose intentional silence. And if you're on the journey of reclaiming your inner voice, don't rush. Just be still for a while. Sometimes it's in the silence where you find yourself most clearly. 3. When being misunderstood is an advantage, the art of invisibility in a noisy world. Have you ever tried to explain yourself? Explaining because someone misunderstood your good intentions. Explaining because others underestimated you. Explaining because you couldn't stand being misunderstood. I was like that too. There was a time I believed maturity meant being clear, telling others who I was, what I thought, how I wasn't what they assumed. I fought to be understood correctly. But the harder I tried, the more exhausted I became. And then I realized not everyone deserves to understand you. And you don't need everyone to. A friend of mine, a former lawyer turned therapist, once told me, I spent the first 10 years of my career trying to prove I wasn't weak. And it took just 1 year to realize the misunderstood silence I held was actually my greatest strength. In Stoic philosophy, there's a powerful concept, the strategy of intentional ambiguity. It's not deception, it's not manipulation, it's a rational choice to let others misunderstand you when that gives you freedom. You don't need to draw every boundary, explain every plan, voice every thought. On the contrary, it's that very space where others are left to guess about you. That is where you hold the most control. Remember, a person who is easy to read is a person who is easy to control. When you reveal everything, you become predictable. And once you're predictable, people can prepare to outmaneuver you, manipulate you, take your power. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The wise man doesn't retaliate. He simply refuses to become like the one who wronged him." Meaning, you don't need to correct every false judgment. You just need to stand firm in your truth. Once in a session, I asked a client, a former senior manager, "Do you feel exhausted trying to maintain your ideal image all the time?" She replied with something I'll never forget. Sometimes I wish I could be misunderstood, because at least then I'd get to rest." The truth is, when you allow others the right to misunderstand you, you also give yourself space to breathe. You step away from unnecessary games, you stop maintaining appearances, you stop correcting every rumor. You become free. In a world where everyone tries to be seen correctly, the one who dares to be silent amidst the misjudgments holds the deepest power, because that silence doesn't come from submission, but from choice. Let others think you're weak while you observe in silence. Let them underestimate you while you prepare for a longer journey. Let them believe they're above you while you never even entered the race. You don't need to deny it. You just need to step back far enough to see the whole game. The Stoic doesn't need recognition in the present tense. They live by values, not expectations. And so they can accept being misunderstood if it helps them keep what matters most: peace, freedom, and agency. If someone is misunderstanding you right now, take a slow breath. Ask yourself, what am I trying to prove, and to whom? And if the answer isn't clear, maybe it's time to stop proving. If you've ever been misunderstood and instead of reacting you chose to stay still and move forward, leave a comment. I don't need to be understood correctly, I need to be free. Because in the end, as Seneca once said, we suffer not from the truth, but from our opinion of the truth. So choose stillness and let others keep their opinions. You keep your freedom. 4. Not everyone deserves your presence. Try to recall, have you ever been in a relationship where you were always the one to reach out first? Always the one on time, always the one trying to maintain the connection? And then one day, you stopped. You stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped explaining. Strangely, that silence echoed louder than all the words you'd ever spoken. The other person started noticing. They asked, "How have you been lately?" But what unsettled them most wasn't what you said. It was the fact that you were no longer there. In this world, what is overly present is often taken for granted. People get used to you always being there, when they need you, when they're bored, when they don't think much at all. And then when you disappear, the emptiness begins to speak. I once counseled a client, a man in his 40s working in the creative industry. He shared how he used to be everywhere. Events, meetings, social media. Anytime someone needed him, he showed up. He called it networking. But the more he showed up, the more diluted he felt, until one day he withdrew, turned off notifications, chose where he would appear more deliberately. And surprisingly, people started asking about him more, not because he became more famous, but because he became scarce, strategically. In Stoic philosophy, withdrawal is not avoidance. It is a conscious choice to protect energy, recalibrate value, and most importantly, not get swept into things that no longer serve inner growth. Seneca once said, "We are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting it." You don't need to be everywhere. You just need to be in the right places. Timely absence adds weight to presence. A person who speaks little, when they do speak, their words carry weight. A person who rarely appears, when they do show up, people pay attention. Like a rare gift, appearing only on special occasions, they are anticipated, respected, and cherished. You can try this. Next time you receive an invitation, don't accept immediately. Ask yourself if it truly deserves your time and energy. In a conversation, instead of replying right away, pause for a few seconds. That slowness will show the other person you are not easily read or swayed. Turn off some of the bells that pull you toward distraction. Messages, notifications, social media, so you can return to the center within yourself. The modern world wants you to always be online, always responsive, always available. But Stoic philosophy reminds us, when you offer your presence too easily, you're also saying, "There's nothing about me worth preserving." And that is a lie you shouldn't tell yourself. A seasoned person does not show up to impress. They show up with purpose. And when they no longer appear, that too carries meaning. Not because they are lost, but because they've chosen a different path, quieter, deeper. Let your absence make others reflect, not force you to explain. Let them ask, why aren't you here anymore? Instead of you having to ask, do I still matter here? If you are currently stepping away from old cycles, don't feel guilty. You're not disappearing. You're regenerating. And when you return, you won't need to shout to be heard, because people will feel you through the energy you carry. If you are practicing intentional withdrawal, leave a comment. I choose to show up with purpose, as a reminder to yourself that you no longer need to be constantly present to be acknowledged. You are someone who chooses timing, chooses space, and chooses presence as a gift, not an obligation. 5. When you don't need to lead with power, but with resonance. Imagine this. You walk into a room where someone is losing control. Their words are rapid. Their body is tense. The energy feels like it's about to explode, and then you don't interrupt. You don't try to fix it. You don't resist. You simply sit there quietly. You breathe more slowly, soften just a little. You look at them as if you're truly seeing them, not to react, but to understand. Gradually, something strange happens. They begin to slow down, not because you controlled them, but because you became a mirror, non-judging, undisturbed. In therapy, we call this mirroring. In Stoicism, it's a higher form of silent influence. You don't change others by hand-holding them, but by becoming a space in which they can see themselves. A friend of mine, a corporate coach, once said, "When I sit with an anxious CEO, I don't jump in with advice. I listen and silently match their breathing. When I slow down, they slow down. When I ask one short question, they start to reflect instead of react." That moment when the other person begins to shift, not because you convinced them, but because they felt mirrored without being steered, that's when you're truly leading. Epictetus once said, "We have the greatest influence not when we speak more, but when we are fully present." And presence isn't just physical presence. It's presence of still mind, full attention, and the gentle ability to attune to the inner world of the person before you. The Stoic does not walk into a room to dominate. They don't need others to be quiet to be heard. They lead through resonance, not force. When someone speaks fast, they mirror calm. When someone is angry, they mirror peace. When someone feels attacked, they mirror non-judgmental acceptance. You know, I've had conversations where I said nothing more than a few open-ended questions. But by the end, the other person said, "Thank you for helping me find clarity." Even though I had simply been there, quietly observing, reflecting. That is the power of a mind unhurried, a mind that doesn't need to win, a mind that doesn't rush to offer solutions. Consider this. When you argue, you are opposite the other person. But when you mirror, you are beside them. And in a world where everyone is bracing for defense, someone who simply sits beside, unhurried, without force, is often the one who creates the deepest transformation. You don't need to be right. You just need to speak at the right moment. You don't need to teach. You just need to be present deeply enough for others to learn from themselves. Mirroring is not a technique, but the natural result of an inner state trained in calm, in listening without imposition, in leading without possession. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "He who masters himself will influence others, not through control, but through inspiration." So next time you step into a tense conversation, don't try to dominate. Try entering with silent listening. Observe the breath, the eyes, the pace, and reflect it back with deep attunement. You'll see people trust you, not because you're right, but because they see themselves in your stillness. If you are practicing deep listening, not to respond, but to resonate, leave a comment. I choose to lead through stillness, because you don't need to impose to be trusted. You just need to be present. 6. When true strength lies in the step that walks away without regret. Some conversations don't need closure. You just need to stand up and walk away. Some relationships don't need winning. You just need to stop participating. Have you ever felt this? A moment when you suddenly realized you no longer belong here. Not because you lost, not because of pride, simply because you've grown clear enough that you no longer need to try. I once had a client, a woman in her 50s who had been a wife, a mother, a boss for over 20 years. She shared that she always stayed in relationships with no connection, in jobs without inspiration, in repetitive conversations, just because she thought leaving is weakness. But then she began to learn how to stop without guilt. To say, I understand now, and I choose to move on, without needing to fix it. She didn't blame, didn't explain, didn't ask to be understood, and that was the first time in her life she felt truly strong. In Stoicism, not every action must be taken, not everything is to be endured, and above all, not every place that once held value is meant to be kept. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have strength not in enduring everything, but in choosing what is worth enduring." People often confuse patience with loyalty, but sometimes the bravest act is walking away from what was once familiar, not because you're ungrateful, but because you've changed, and you honor that change. Intentional departure is a high form of emotional sovereignty. It says, I don't need external situations to define my inner worth. It lets you stop without waiting for a blow up, without waiting for the last straw. You leave not out of anger, but out of clarity, not from hurt, but because you've healed enough not to repeat the wound. I once sat with a father. He had lost contact with his son for years. One day he sent a simple message, "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." And then he sent nothing else. I asked, "Does that make you sad?" He replied, "Of course, but I no longer need to cling in order to prove I'm a good father. I've done my part. The rest is his." That is the poise of someone who knows themselves. They don't walk away out of disappointment, but because they know their boundaries and what no longer belongs to them. The Stoic is not the one who stays everywhere to prove strength. They are the one who leaves at the right time to preserve clarity for what matters more. They know a debate doesn't need to be concluded. A relationship no longer in harmony deserves release. A role no longer aligned should be passed on to someone else. You don't need to slip away quietly to hurt anyone. You just need to leave with clarity and calm. And that absence will speak for itself. Seneca once reminded us, we do not age with time, but with the things we don't dare to let go of. So if you sense that something no longer nourishes you, breathe deeply and have the courage to walk away. No need to prove anything. No long farewells. You are no longer someone who stays just to hold on to what's already expired. You are someone who chooses to continue the journey with an unburdened mind. If you're standing at the threshold, knowing you should leave, but still hesitating, leave a comment. I walk away not from anger, but from understanding. It's not an ending, it's the beginning of a chapter that is deeper, lighter, and truly yours. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. We'll meet again, not in noise, but in the quiet moments when you need peace, a reminder, a grounding presence. Farewell to you who are learning to live with silent courage and quiet self-respect. 7. Rebuilding your inner space daily. Slow living for deeper living. Imagine a morning like this. You wake up without reaching for your phone, no email, no social media, no rushing into the race of news, invitations, deadlines, unanswered messages. You just sit alone with a warm cup of tea and a blank journal, and you write a few lines. What do I truly need today to live fully? What can I let go of to feel lighter? Am I living by choice or just reacting to the world? Just a few minutes, but they shape the rest of your day. The Stoics don't wait for a crisis to look inward. They prepare in advance, like a warrior who sharpens his armor each morning, not because there's a war, but because he doesn't want to be caught off guard. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote in his journal every morning, not for anyone to read, not to document victories, but to remind himself, there will be rude people, envious ones, challenges, but I've anticipated them and I will still live rightly. I once guided a businessman going through a professional crisis. He told me, I don't lack achievements, I just lack clarity each morning. So he began dedicating 10 minutes each day, writing down 3 things. What today is not worth reacting to? What should I focus my full attention on? If today were my last, what would I do differently? 3 questions, but they led to a completely different version of himself. In today's world, we're measured by speed. Respond quickly, you're smart. Do more, you're impressive. Available at all times, you're praised as multitasking. But to me, and to those practicing a Stoic life, the deeper question is, can you stay with yourself in silence? Rebuilding your inner space daily doesn't require deep meditation or elaborate rituals, just the ability to pause, to step out of the whirlwind of reactions. You don't need to say yes to every invitation, like you don't need to reply to every message within 5 minutes. You don't have to live in a constant state of being summoned. The Stoic lives like a mindful host, knowing exactly who is welcome into their inner space and who isn't. If you want to live with depth, start each morning like a guardian of your inner world. Ask yourself, where is my mind headed? What emotion is taking up the most space right now? Am I awake or just on repeat? Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our view of them. So if you don't clean your mind each day, are you still living from yesterday's dusty, distorted lens? Someone once told me, I don't need anyone next to me each morning. I just need myself, but a more aware version than I was yesterday. And I think that's a beautiful definition of modern Stoic practice. If you are learning to pause each morning, not to control the day, but to reconnect with yourself, leave a comment. I begin from within. Because you can't control everything that happens today, but you can always choose how you enter the day with clarity, steadiness, and intention. 8. Not reacting is a strategy. Training non-reactivity daily. Have you ever felt exhausted by the smallest things? A message left on scene, a colleague's irritated glance, an offhand comment that struck a nerve, and the whole day you carried a subtle weight as if you needed to do something. Explain, react, confront, or at the very least, reply. I understand. I've been there too. Then came a time when I began practicing something simple. Don't react immediately. I didn't suppress the irritation. I just paused. I let it sit there like a glowing ember unblown. And strangely, when I didn't react, I started seeing more. I saw that it wasn't really that serious. I saw that the person speaking was hurting too. I saw that I didn't need to say anything. Epictetus once said, when someone offends you, remember, it is you who has allowed it to hurt you. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? But look deeper and you'll see. Every reaction is a choice. You can choose not to react, and in that space you reclaim your self-mastery. I once guided a single mother. She said she often lost her temper when her child misbehaved. She told me, honestly, just 5 minutes into the day, if my kid does something wrong, I snap. I suggested she try, not reacting, just observe, just breathe. A week later, she messaged me. I didn't expect silence to be this powerful. My child self-corrected, and I didn't feel drained. You see? Not reacting doesn't mean weakness. It's a strategy, the strategy of someone who understands. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every word deserves a reply. Not every emotion is worth trading your peace for. Try this. Next time someone mocks you, don't respond immediately. Just look at them. No anger. No disdain. No sarcasm. Just observe, like watching a wave rise and fall. Because if you don't push back, they have nothing to push against. And when you don't react, you become a sturdy wall. The waves may crash, but they won't shake you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, a tranquil mind is the ultimate fortress. No one can breach it unless you open the gate from within. So don't hand over the keys to your mind. They're not worthy. Only you get to decide what's important, what has the right to move you. You know, some days you don't need to win an argument. You just need to keep your mind from being dragged. That is a quiet victory, but a profound one. The victory of someone who knows how to hold themselves steady when the outside world is falling apart. If today you are insulted, misunderstood, or pushed into reacting, ask, does this reaction bring me closer to my values? Am I trading my peace for something that isn't worth it? If the answer is no, smile and stay silent. Not because you're weak, but because you've chosen something greater, yourself. If you are practicing intentional non-reaction, leave a comment. I choose not to react to protect my peace. Because you don't need to be understood right away, you just need not to lose yourself every time the world trembles. 9. Choosing what deserves silence. Not everyone deserves your response. Here's a gentle but powerful truth. Not everything requires a reply. Not everyone is worthy of your words. Have you ever been in a situation where someone threw a passive-aggressive comment and you felt like you had to say something, had to defend yourself, had to clap back, had to teach them a lesson, but after responding, you didn't feel better? Just drained. And worse, you had stepped out of your own calm and into a script they wrote. The Stoics understand. Response is a choice, not a reflex. You don't have to correct every distorted truth. You don't have to prove to everyone that you're right. You don't need to argue with those who have no intention of understanding. Seneca once said, "A clear mind doesn't chase after noise. It chooses, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom." I once worked with a client, a department head at a major corporation. He told me, I used to fire back whenever someone said something wrong about me, but now I know when to speak and when to just smile and let it go. I asked him, what changed? He replied, I realized feedback is an investment, and I can't keep investing in things that don't yield returns. You see, responding takes energy. Responding, it takes time. It's an intervention into your own peace. And if you don't choose wisely, you're unknowingly letting others pull you out of your center. There's a question I often offer to my students whenever they feel the urge to speak out. Does this reaction serve my long-term clarity or just my short-term ego? If the answer is ego, then you already know. In Stoic practice, not speaking is also an action. Silence isn't submission. It's a wise choice. I choose calm. I don't need to win meaningless arguments. I don't need others to see me as better just to feel that I am enough. I remember once, after being falsely criticized, I stayed silent. A friend asked, "Why didn't you say anything?" I simply smiled and said, "Because I don't need that person to see clearly. I just need not to be pulled off track." You can try this. Next time you feel the urge to respond to something unpleasant, write it down, but don't send it. Revisit it after 10 minutes and ask yourself, does silence have more value right now? If the answer is yes, you've just chosen a very rare kind of freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't need to argue with someone who's asleep. Your job is to awaken within yourself." So the next time you're provoked, remember, choosing what deserves silence is a form of self-leadership. You're not avoiding, you're prioritizing. Not responding doesn't mean you've lost. It means you didn't step into the mud that should be sidestepped. If you're learning to speak less to preserve more, leave a comment. I choose strategic silence. It's not weakness. It's how you protect the clarity within from things unworthy of its disturbance. In the end, you'll see, it's not the loudest who influence most deeply, not the most present who are remembered longest, not the sharpest responders who are truly strong. True strength always arrives in silence. In how you stay calm in chaos, in how you leave things unanswered when they don't deserve your breath, in how you walk away without needing to slam the door. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be cold. It teaches you to keep the fire inside without letting the winds of life extinguish it. It doesn't ask you to reject emotion, only to master it, not be mastered by it. You don't need to change the whole world. You just need not let the world change the direction of your heart. And if you're walking this path, the path of deep, slow, intentional living, know this, you are not alone. Here there are others like you, learning to be silently intentional, grounded in presence, and to love life deeply without the need to display it loudly. So we've walked through 9 principles, not to become perfect, but to become a little steadier, a little clearer, and a little freer in our own lives. You may not apply everything right away. There may still be days when you react, get angry, or feel drained. And that's perfectly okay, because this isn't a journey to become someone. It's a journey to return to yourself, slowly, patiently, and kindly. If these reflections touch something inside you, leave a comment as a way of marking your inner awakening. And if you'd like to continue walking together in future chapters, don't forget to follow the channel and like this video, so I know you're still here, still quietly training your heart to stand like stone in a world of wind. See you in the next lesson, whenever you're ready.